How we doing, pirates? I do want to get to these questions for co-creation of value, module 6, our second to last module. But before we get to these questions, I need to spend 2 more minutes here in this PowerPoint deck that we discussed briefly when we were talking about leadership, because these kind of fit together really well. Now, remember, if you want this deck, it's on my blog, Leadership Styles in a Social Media World. There is the deck, and here's an audio MP3 file that I recorded when I was doing this way back when. Okay. Now, what's really important here is, we already did the leadership side of the question, is, we're in this bottom-up world. We're in this Web 2.0 world. We're in this, the days of we package it and you buy it are absolutely gone. That the consumer and firm are intimately involved in jointly creating value. The top-down world was one way, B2C. The bottom-up world is B2C, C2B, and C2C, where we have this positive word of mouth where customers become advocates. And this is really what I wanted to get at here. This is co-creation of value in an image. I know I briefly showed this to you before, but maybe it makes a little bit more sense now, given the articles that you just read. Now, we have the firm and we have the consumer, and in the articles that we talked about, we have this in the marketplace, the co-creation of unique value. Now, granted, my article that I did with Locander is from 2008. It's kind of old, all right? And you saw some of the leadership language in that article that we saw in Module 3, Leadership, were brought back to this co-creation of value. In order to have co-creation of value, you need that market orientation mindset. Because if you're not externally oriented towards the customer and towards competition, you're not paying attention enough to the market, which is where this co-creation of value happens. So we could talk about it in terms of R&D, advertising, actually making products, beta testing. One of the articles that we had in this week was about A/B testing. Okay? That is innovation in a co-creation of value kind of way. Okay? Real quick reading list. Well, Wisdom of Crowds probably is the co-creation of value book. If you had to read a book on this, that's where I would start. There's a couple other good ones called Crowdsourcing, and if you're really enamored with this topic, we can go there. All right, now that we set that up, let's get into some of these questions. Brief history. I wrote this article because I started teaching this course in 2004, and I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't a good article for my class, so I wrote one. Probably should write another one, but it's another story. COM leadership for the 21st century. Given the role of the CMO today, what would be the best path experience-wise for someone to take in order to become a successful CMO? Well, a lot of the really good CMOs tend to come out of sales, and a lot of other really good CMOs tend to come out of finance. The sales one makes sense in a CRM world. If you have the strongest relationships with the firm's largest customers, you're in line for one of them CMO roles. But finance really has a skill set when we think about ratio analysis, when we think about all the metrics that goes into making a financial decision. Well, that's really what the CMO is doing on that level. It's not about the creative. It's not about the, I'm a genius, this is what I want to do because I have the CMO role outside my door. Those are the CMOs that only last 14 months. Those are the CMOs that last 18 months. The CMOs that have the rigorous analytical analysis that listens to the crowd last for a lot longer than that. What is one leadership quality skill that most CMOs have? Well, I don't know whether they have it or not, but this idea of the Web 2.0 and having the empathy to listen to your crowd, most CMOs, they have the title outside the door and they just have this monster ego because they're in charge. You know, they climb that ladder their entire career and they're finally the CMO. And guess what? They want to tell people what to do and not listen. And if we go back to the leadership, if we go back to Goldman and the emotional intelligence, I think CMOs fail when they don't have the emotional intelligence for the role. We read an article earlier in the semester suggesting that CMOs are unnecessary. They could be unnecessary. This article suggests otherwise. This article is also older. Does there need to be a true... And also the editor asked for a CMO article. Does there need to be a true CMO position, or can multiple people take the CMO role? I think multiple people can take the CMO role. And as a matter of fact, we're going to see more articles that it's not the CMO, it's the CMI. You know, they want to blend marketing and IT. We saw some of that earlier in the semester. We're going to see some of that in week 7 as well. You know, I'm not a fan of silos. You guys know I'm not a fan of silos. You know that I'm more interested in market orientation. And I think, as opposed to the org chart being divided by function, marketing, I think the org chart should be organized by objective, or client, or product. And there might be a marketing, IT, finance person for a particular product or a particular client that they work together to become the C-suite for that particular function in the firm. Are there some ways CMOs can co-create value? There's tons of ways that CMO can co-create value. They're listed in all the articles that I gave you this week. That was the purpose of these articles. We talked about innovation and R&D and branding. And think of where we've been at so far this semester. I mean, we started off with market orientation. Then we did SAT, loyalty, and CRM. There's no way we get CRM without co-creation of value, because it's that learning relationship that happens. You know. Then we did branding. We already talked about branding. Of course, branding co-creation. That's the whole articles. You know, I served them up in a platter to you. I think in the bottom-up world, we have no choice but to co-create, because the crowd is so influential on our activities. If you give too much power to customers, can that negatively affect a business? Okay, this is a really good question. Okay, so where is that power balance? Or how am I listening but not listening? You know, I think a good way to think about this is that actually there was a very good case question about this. Mendoza Marathon, and how much should they listen to that data? I don't know if you're listening to everything from the crowd at face value. I think you're listening to hear the conversations, and you want to interpret the conversations and read in between the lines. Classic example would be if we turn the clock back to 1900 and Henry Ford was quote-unquote doing marketing research. This is a classic example, by the way, but it serves its purpose. Henry Ford would have done the marketing research, and everybody would have said, you know something, I just need a faster horse. Because they wanted a horse that could go longer, could go faster, maybe didn't have to feed it as much, maybe would live longer. They wanted a better horse. Now, that's the verbatim translation that's coming out of the marketing research. But it's the CMO's job, it's the C-suite's job to read in between the lines. And really what they were asking for was better transportation, not a better horse. So that's where you can say, okay, the customers and the power, and the customers may be complaining about something, and they may be upset about something, but R&D wise and manufacturing wise, it's in the pipeline. It's just going to take 18 months to get to market. So I really think that even though we're co-creating value, that the lead driver of the conversation is still the firm. And the firm ultimately makes the final decision. Can focusing too much on efforts for future neglect the present state of business? I don't think so. I mean, because usually what happens is it's the opposite. Most firms are so focused on the present that they sacrifice the future to make the present look better. Quarterly results, Wall Street. They have to react to something in the marketplace fast because a competitor's doing something. And they lose track of where they should be going in the future. I think a perfect example of this is just what's happened this week with this whole Galaxy Fold thing. That's just been a black eye for Samsung. And they rushed a product to market too quickly just because a smaller competitor that's doing really well in China, it's a Chinese competitor, had one of these folding tablet things in the works. And Samsung, the 800-pound gorilla, wanted to be first to the marketplace. But it was an inferior product, unfortunately. Neat idea, but bad execution. Do you think the top-down structure will ever resurface in the future? I think the top-down structure is still the dominant model in most firms. I mean, if I were to pick 10 firms, 9.5 of them would be top-down. I mean, every government scenario is top-down. Every legal scenario is top-down. Every healthcare scenario is top-down. Every military scenario is top-down. And then there's a lot of other companies that, due to their education, due to the traditional MBA programs, due to them not realizing that we're in a bottom-up world, they still pretend that they're in a top-down world. I mean, all of collectivist societies, if you look at collectivist societies around the world, they're very much hierarchical top-down. Bottom-up is what's happening in culture, but there are very few firms that really get the bottom-up. There's very few, in my opinion. How can companies protect themselves against anti-ownership? Considering this is a trend, this trend is more expensive. Anti-ownership? Anti-ownership? I'm not sure what you're asking here. You mean them not buying into the brand, therefore not co-creating value? Well, making sure that you have empathy, making sure you are listening, making sure that you're reacting, that you're doing something, that you appreciate the crowd. Not sure exactly what you're asking here, though. Where do you see the next trend going? Do you think most consumers will prefer the future and these same rules for our leaders will apply? I think more and more firms have no choice but to wake up to this bottom-up world mentality. I think the future is exactly what we're talking about now. And I can find examples of companies that are doing it now. But it's 1 out of 10. It's maybe not even 1 out of 10. It's 0.5 out of 10. It's a very small percentage. Yet, in so many industries, look at retailing and look at Zara. Zara runs their organization very much like a bottom-up kind of, every month they bring in new inventory. They're doing an awful lot of listening via what's happening. The first week, they have product in the store, they make very limited amounts of inventory. And they see what's hot and they see what's not hot. And based on what's hot in the first 5 days, they fast fashion and then within 5 or 10 days after that, they get a lot more inventory that was good or that was in demand, and a lot less inventory of stuff that they thought was going to be good that wasn't. I don't see JCPenney's doing that. I don't see Sears doing that. What type of user-generated content should CMOs monitor to guide their vision? Oh my gosh. This is, we have B2C, we have C2B. So anytime they're directly tweeting at us, sure. Anytime they're blogging about us, sure. Anytime there's a conversation about us, sure. Anytime they're talking about our direct competitors or our industry, sure. That's why we're market-oriented. We want to know what our customers' needs and wants are, and we want to know not only how we are doing vis-a-vis those needs or wants, but also how our competitors are doing via those needs or wants. How can CMO leaders make this leader shift? Oh, by the way, this is a low-candor term, and separate themselves from the mundane daily decisions to get this done. Sometimes it's easier to do things yourself than explaining it to someone else. Well, believe it or not, it's easier for the CMO or the CEO or someone from the C-suite to direct the rest of the organization because you're at the helm and you control the wheel. But even if you're not at the helm, and even if you're not controlling the wheel, the idea is not yours. The idea is coming from the audience. It's coming from the customers. It's coming from the crowd. You can go to the C-suite and say, look, this is not my idea. I'm just listening to our customers. I'm the messenger here. I'm not making a decision. You make the decision. But this is what I'm seeing. This is what we're seeing. This is what they're saying. What should we do? And that starts that flywheel, Jim Collins, flywheel spinning in that bottom-up, market-oriented, leadership kind of way. Should leaders be trained on delegating work better to help prevent the sleepless nights? Yeah, I think leaders also should trust. Delegating is one thing. Micromanaging after delegating is another. What really good leaders do usually is they kind of set the idea of, something? This is what we should be doing. You tell us how we're going to achieve that goal. And that's way better than delegating. All right. This HBR article is a great article. It's very much in the spirit of co-creation of value. And the title alone sells it. I almost feel like we could stop at the title. Know what your customers want before they do. That is very much a co-creation of value. And how does this happen? Well, they have a CRM database. They have an algorithm that becomes a recommendation engine based on your behavior that's in the database. This is what Netflix does to you. This is what Amazon does to you. This is what CVS does to you. This is what Target and Kroger and very good companies, this is what they do. And we call it the next best offer. And Kroger is probably $1 billion a year more profitable because they do a really good job with next best offers in an industry that has razor thin margins. What is the best way for competitors to snatch up lost opportunities of firms that fail to utilize? Now, this is a great question. Now, could we be listening out there to the conversations to see what our competitors' fan base is complaining about? Could we become a customer to our competitors to see if they are offering strong next best offers? Right? Are well-designed next best offers the key for a company to stay ahead of the competition? I think it's one. I think it's one of the keys. But usually what happens is you're thinking of the next best offer as the outcome of that learning relationship from the CRM data. You're not having the CRM data in the database just so you can email me until I'm blue in the face like Dick's does and Pottery Barn does. And I get 5 offers a day from Ann Taylor Loft because my wife and I have a spam email account together that we use for all these companies that don't know how to develop a relationship. They just spam us. There's no learning there. So yes, I think it's a way to stay ahead of the competition if they do it right. Should companies deliver next best offers in multiple ways at once or stick to one type? Multiple ways at once. But it should be multiple different offers. It depends on the time of the year, the seasonality, your purchase history, what they can learn about you. The idea is, when I go into Amazon, they make recommendations for me for books that I didn't know existed. Netflix makes recommendations in documentaries for me that I didn't know existed. And I'm receptive to these next best offers because they know what I've watched and what I've liked and what I've rated and what I've purchased. And the algorithm does a very good job of saying, well, if you like this, 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 and this, chances are you're going to like this too. In the article, insisting that a rep deliver a specific offer in every case may actually reduce the customer likelihood of accepting the offer and therefore post-purchase satisfaction. How and why is this? Well, this is my story that I just talked about with Ann Taylor Loft. I mean, where is that fine line that the NBO is a really good recommendation or a continual spamming one-way relationship? There's a continuum there. There's a continuum there. A lot of Amazon's and a lot of Netflix's next best offers happens when you're inside the experience. Yeah, there's some stuff that come outside the experience, especially when you go to Amazon and you leave a cart empty, or you leave a cart with something in it and don't complete the transaction. I think eBay's a tad too aggressive. If I go in and I'm searching for a lot of things because I'm checking price points and they think that I'm interested in purchasing, and then I have eBay ads following me around because of cookies for like 3 days on some guitar that I wanted to do a price check on. That's... By the way, legal, there's nothing illegal about this. Ethical, well, that's a whole nother ballgame. I think companies are pushing the boundaries to what's really socially acceptable. If you're too pushy as a salesperson, that's unethical. If you're making someone uncomfortable or their behavior towards you is, not again, I think that would be defined as unethical. I would be less interested in a relationship with you. Therefore, you are pushing it towards the unethical. Too much, too pushy. Telemarketing, way too pushy. Are customers aware of the data collected about them? No, they're not. Even you're not. Even me, who studies this stuff, I still get blown away with how much information they really know about us. It's very, very scary. And why aren't customers then getting better or more useful offers? Because there are tons of companies that collect the data, but there aren't tons of companies that do a really good job with the data. Amazon is fanatical. Netflix is fanatical. To the point where Netflix did a co-creation of value offer. They wanted someone to increase their ratings by how they rate things by, this was a couple years ago. I think they wanted a 1% increase, or was it 10%? It was a very small number. I think 25, you can Google this to find the exact story. But Netflix took a big chunk of data testing data, trainer data, so to speak, right? I think 29 or 39 firms signed up for the contest. They whittled it down to 5 based on the initial. They then worked with those 5 and gave them more data. 2 of the teams decided to team up together, and they won the $10 million prize. Netflix gave away $10 million to, I think one was a consulting firm and the other one was a bunch of professors that figured out a way to make the Netflix recommendations 10% better than what Netflix is doing now. That is a co-creation of value example. Netflix is the only company that's ever done this. Amazon hasn't even done that. But there's only so many companies out there that are really doing a good job with the data analytics, which is one of the reasons why it's one of the hottest areas now, because there's really not that many people that do it well. Okay. There are several companies who have sidebars on their websites that say, people who bought this also bought this, or similar products, you may like this. Yes, these are next best offers, or these are kind of recommendations. What makes some sites more successful than others with NBOs? Well, there's a lazy way to do this, and then there's a more detailed or nuanced way to do this. You know, the lazy way to do it is just to take a very surface level look and say, you know, if you like Infinity War, you're going to like Endgame. Well, of course, it's a sequel. I mean, it's not really, you don't need rocket science to make that call, you know. But there are other people that, you know, there are other brands that make a next level intuition that says, you know something, if they're watching Infinity War, what they really like is fantasy. And they like a fantasy with a very long, detailed storyline. Well, guess what? They should be listening to, they should start this book series that have 7 books. That is a much deeper level of analysis than a simple people who bought this. I received a lot of highly personalized emails from DSW. I don't agree with you that they're highly personalized. They have your name on it and they're spamming you every day. I get them too, by the way. Sometimes multiple times a day. Actually, many times, multiple times a day. Are these ambos? Yes, they are a next best NMBO. But if you look at the continuum, if you want to put Amazon on this side of the continuum, like the best of the best of the best, or Netflix, the best of the best of the best, I got DSW not even halfway there. I got them definitely on the lazy side. All right, next article. Building an Insights Engine. Ooh, I don't think I could have come up with a better title. I really like this title. It is such a co-creation of value title. Oh, this is even better. You want to talk about having a market-oriented mindset. This is a title for a market-oriented mindset. So here is another article where they're trying to take that CMO role and split it. Chief Marketing Information Officer, kind of. Chief Marketing, you know, that kind of thing. In consideration of the time, effort, and finance involved in building a CMI, is it something that all companies across varying industries would benefit from? No. I think, you know, Amazon and Netflix has a one-on-one relationship with us. They positively need the data insights because they have a one-on-one relationship with us. But look at Nike. Nike doesn't have a one-on-one relationship with us. Nike sells very, very little direct to us. They're starting to build their own stores. They're starting to have apps. They want to have that one-on-one relationship with us. But anytime a company has to sell through a middleman or a retailer and the relationship is not direct with the end user, that reduces the amount of this algorithm-like NBO thinking. But Netflix is direct. eBay is direct. Amazon is direct. You know, those, oh yeah. You need to go all in. Which one of the 10 characteristics would you say is most important? How can a company be sure they're following all 10 characteristics? Do all 10 be involved? I think I'm just going to rinse and repeat what I just said. That's very much the same conversation. That's where I would go with that. Although the quality of the data isn't relevant, shouldn't you still want a large sample size to yield the best results? Okay, we could go on a deep bender here about sample size. The larger the sample size always doesn't necessarily mean the stronger the results. If you think about economics and diminishing marginal returns, this isn't the exact same thing when it comes to sampling and data. It isn't, but conceptually it is. There's a thing called power, meaning your data is so large and so strong that everything you test is going to be statistically significant because the sample size is so large. The data has a lot of power. So that sampling is a science. It's literally a science. Okay, and having the appropriate sample size vis-a-vis what you want to test will result in the best outcomes. What is the best way to tell a story to get the most insightful data? Ooh. All right, so this is a great question, and the reason why this is a great question is this is one of the failures of data analytics. We can spin and churn an Excel spreadsheet and SAS and SPSS ourselves until we're blue in the face. I could print out SEM models. I can do conjoint analysis. I can do all kinds of stuff. But really, the interpretation of the data is the most important thing. The insights that you get out of the data is the most important thing. And that skill, I think, is even in less availability than people who know how to spin data. There's a lot of people who know how to spin data, but there's not a lot of people who know what to do with the insights from that data. You could give 10 people the same data. You can have 10 people do the same data analysis on it, and only 1 or 2 people get the story right. And that's really, really common. How can companies gain a competitive advantage on their peers and provide their customers with the best product and exactly what they want? That's this whole module. It's co-creation of value. It's that listening conversation. It's the give and take. It's meeting people in the marketplace. It's using them to help with the R&D. It's using them, look at the last article in this reading list, an A/B test. Can the CMI be implemented in any industry and always produce positive results? No, no, and no. I mean, I gave you some caveats earlier when we started this article. No, no, and no. Other than IT, what other areas can CMI work well with? Well, finance, of course. Operations, supply chain, logistics. I think a company is a system where all the functional areas need to work together to make the system work. It's almost like having a band where the singer's really good and they got a pretty good guitar player and a pretty good bass player and a lousy drummer. Well, the band's only going to be so good if the backbeat sucks, right? I don't think it's just one area. It's another reason why I don't like functional silos. Kind of getting out of that. All right. This is Article 4, somewhat of a curveball. What would be the proper turn here? How do you avoid over-counting, over-emphasizing, overdoing the crowd? I know we've already talked about that a little bit today, but I kind of, I don't want to bow at the altar of the crowd. I love the crowd. I want to be in conversation with the crowd. But is it mob rule? No. No. And specifically, there's a whole other conversation on which metrics really we should be paying more attention to or not. Are there situations where it's crowdsourcing via likes, votes, and comments can be useful? Well, there's tons of situations. That's what these articles are about, and there are multiple examples, and we've already mentioned a number. Is crowdsourcing really flawed across the board? It can be really flawed across the board, especially if you're listening too much verbatim, or you're that's that whole Henry Ford, example I did earlier. Or does it depend on the experiment? I don't know what you mean by experiment. Is crowdsourcing useful to companies anymore? Well, it's the future. What do you mean anymore? I think we're just starting, and there's not that many people that do it well, which is why they're poo-pooing crowdsourcing. How can companies deter people's biases? Well, you don't take them literally. You know what the biases are. Richard Thaler just won the Nobel Prize in economics, and he calls them nudges. Making people do thing that's better for them. What did he call it? Something paternalism. Are focus groups better indicators of idea quality? No. Focus groups are a very useful tool. But focus groups are very exploratory in nature. They're not confirmatory. I mean, if you have a $35 million brand, $35 million in revenue, and you got a focus group of 20 people together at Seton Hall University, all the same age and all pretty much the same social economic background from the greater New York City area, and you find something interesting from the focus group, are you then going to bet $35 million on that? No, it's one focus group. The idea of the focus group is to explore. Okay, you need to do another study, large-scale study, to confirm. I know this isn't a marketing research class, but, I think as marketing research, like the way I think about building a house. You can't build a house with just a hammer. You need a whole toolbox to build a house. Well, marketing research is the same thing. There's not one tool. There's like 12 tools. Depending on what your objective is which tool you're going to use. The last thing you want to do is try to, you need to put a roof together and you got to cut the wood and the only tool you have is a hammer. Can you break wood with a hammer? Sure. Is it going to be a really good cut? Not really. Is Instagram polling a type of crowdsourcing? Yes, but extremely low level. Same thing with Twitter. Extremely low level. And most of these things, because the question is asked in a leading way, or the question is too broad, or the answer choices suck, that, it's just really participation. It's not really good data collection insight. It's a low-level type of crowdsourcing. What does the author of the article mean by participants who work feverishly? Are these participants simply sharing data, sharing the idea, trying to elicit votes? Maybe instead of feverishly, think about it more as in they're going past a surface level. That's how I would interpret that. How can companies reach a new target markets with crowdsourcing instead of just getting stuck in the same niche? Well, the crowd might be using the product for something else that you didn't realize. I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you went back and read the history of eBay and how eBay was created and all the neat innovations about eBay, it was the crowd, these die-hard loyalists of eBay, that came up with the best ideas that went forward. I mean, heck, probably the biggest of all the ideas was some kind of a payment mechanism instead of waiting for a check to show up and for the check to get cashed or the money order. Guess what? That was PayPal, and PayPal came out of the crowd, which eventually eBay bought because they tried to develop their own version of it, and the crowd liked PayPal better. In your opinion, is crowdsourcing effective? I think it's extremely effective. I am biased. I am a theory Y leader. I am a servant leader. I am a bottom-up kind of guy. I like listening to the crowd. Doug Holt is my ultimate branding guy. It's all about the crowd. It's all about the crowd. Wait until you see me do my final presentation to you guys, and then you'll ask me this question again. You guys are doing your celebration of progress? I'm going to do a celebration of progress as well. Can't likes on social media prove useful when determining to roll out a new product? I think people overvalue the likes. We had an article on this. Likes are helpful, but not conclusive. Likes are an indicator. They might show you a trend, but really deep level meaning, are you going to make a $35 million decision based on likes? No, you need stronger data than a like. With technology and the ability for CRM software to run complex algorithms, we've been talking about this, good question. How do you see in the foreseeable future software that can record crowdsourcing data, sift through it, improve it? Okay, this is AI. This is what AI is. I mean, it's simple automatic decision making. If we think about a computer, everything a computer does is nothing but zeros and ones. Okay? However, when you can do 1 billion calculations a second, oh my gosh. Then those zeros and ones can do incredibly complex things. AI right now is not doing incredibly complex things. But I mean, here's a quick example. IBM and Watson. You've heard of IBM and you've heard of Watson. Well, the professors at IBM, for lack of a better term, decided to give Watson every medical article on cancer ever written. And based on these, 20-something thousand articles that no human could ever read, I think Watson came up with, and I'm going to make up the number, 112 different things that no doctor anywhere in the world were thinking about. Because no doctor in the world read the entire history of literature on cancer and all the effects. That is potential future interesting stuff that's only happening on a very, very, very high level, like a Watson level. I think we're years away from it, to be honest with you, but we need to have these conversations now so that Watson stuff 10 years from now is not surprising. Speaking of our next article, the surprising power of online experiments. I think online experiments is a wonderful co-creation of value tool. And just to be explicit, Facebook doesn't have one Facebook. It very well may be the case that there are a couple hundred different versions of Facebook in operation at any given time. And what I mean by that, this is Facebook, the company Facebook, the Facebook that you logged on to within the last week, month, day, whatever. I don't use the platform all that much. They are constantly testing features and iterations. Zuckerberg's motto used to be move fast and break things. Well, he's done a very good job of breaking things over the last 3 years, hasn't he? It's a whole nother conversation. Now he's move fast and keep the system stable. So what they'll do is they'll break off a chunk of data, 10,000 users, and they'll test something. And we call it an A/B test. And they might do it for a day, a week, or a month. we don't perceive, as the user, we rarely perceive the difference. It could be a color thing, it could be a feature thing, it could be where the button's located. But they'll look for stronger interactions over time amongst these 10,000 people that are getting the test versus the people who are not getting it. That is an A/B test. And companies should be doing this all the time. One man sent, it wasn't just one man, it was John Wanamaker. He was a Philadelphian, and this is one of the most famous quotes in advertising. I know the quote goes something more like, I know I'm wasting half of my advertising budget. The trouble is I don't know which half. That's the quote. If I actually did a blog post on this a number of years ago, if you go to my blog. How do we know what money's being spent correctly? How can this test help? Well, in the top-down world, we know that we don't know. We don't know what a TV ad is bringing in. We don't know. There's no way. We don't know what a billboard does for us. We don't know what is wasted or not wasted. If your objective is to be able to calculate ROI, then you can't waste half your money on advertising vehicles, top-down advertising vehicles, that you can't track. Direct mail, you can track. Email campaigns, you can track. You can use Constant Contact. You can do SEO. Well, it's really SEM, Google AdWords. You can do stuff within Facebook. You can do stuff within Google Analytics. You can do stuff on Instagram. You can do A/B tests to figure out what's working. And as a matter of fact, during the Trump's campaign, we learned a lot of things in 2016. One of the things that his team would do is, in the first 3 hours of any given day, they would run about 100 to 120 ideas. They would literally put, $100, $200 behind a specific campaign. They would run it for 3 hours. They would see what kind of effect there was. And out of the 120, there was only like 4 that there was a significant effect out of it. So what do you think they did in the afternoon? Instead of putting $200 behind something where there's a significant effect, they would put $10,000 behind something where there was a significant effect. And what do you think the next day? They started the process all over again. The Trump campaign was very, very effective in reaching the population that would not normally be influenced by the top-down media. I can't say it any other way than that. If you look at Hillary's campaign was extremely top-down. Extremely top-down. Trump's campaign was not. He had a very simple message. God, I can't believe I'm defending this guy. He had a very simple message. He did tons of crowdsourcing with those rallies where he stroked his ego, but his digital team was solid. Determining which short-term metrics are the best predictors of long-term outcomes is difficult. What are some of the metrics they're speaking about? It depends on the company. It depends on what you're doing, So, all right. The example that I just did with Trump, metaphorically, is exactly what I'm talking about. We could go back to the SAT loyalty CRM thing and, the one number you need to know. Well, SAT is a metric, loyalty is a metric, and would recommend is a metric. I just read a recent article that says would recommend is full of crap. And you guys need to read this article. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if I believe it yet, but we'll see. But it was certainly a significant counter article to everything that I talked about earlier in Module 2. So you have to decide what your success metrics are. I mean, some people only care about branding. Some people care about conversion. Some people care about revenue. So these are the type of metrics. You have to decide what your KPI is, key performing indicator, and then you are going to test against that all the time. And yes, a data scientist would help. Really anyone that does lots of data work, whether you want to call them a data scientist, data analytics, whatever. What's the point of an AA test if results are the same? An AA test is a replication test. You got the effect. Can you get the effect again? That's an AA test. It's called a replication, And in the marketing literature amongst academics, AA tests are not very common. They're not very interesting. We do not have a journal of what do we call it? Hold on. Why am I drawing a blank? Give me a sec. Hitting pause. Replication. There's no journal of marketing replications. But if we go into the sciences, particularly pharmacology, particularly drug testing, they spend a lot of time doing AA tests because the drug has to be effective. What's the effectiveness of this drug? The results can't happen in one test. It's got to be replicated over time. Okay, our last set of questions here. How can companies who can't afford to test every decision determine which ones are worth putting through a controlled experiment? Well, you can go back to the C-suite and you can go back to what your overall goal is. It could be the case that you're a new company, and as a new company, branding and awareness is your number one goal because no one even knows that you exist. So maybe you're a small firm and you don't have the manpower or the financial resources to A/B test everything out the wazoo. Hell, you might not even have a large enough crowd to do so. But you can set a goal, one goal, and you can test against that goal. You have limited resources, you set limited goals, and you do limited tests. Which personnel model would you say is overall best? I think this is more a function of the goal. I don't have a one best. The article describes what controlled experiments lead to innovation. I agree. They lead to insight. They lead to knowledge creation. And that knowledge creation can take a product or an idea or something further. Is this true for all companies? Well, it's true for all companies. You may do an A/B test and the results suck. And if the result sucks, that's actually a result. You may test 4 different colors, and guess what? The results are the same for all 4 colors. So what does that tell you? It tells you that color's not a meaningful thing to your audience. But there's a lot of times where color is a really big deal, like the color red in collectivist societies, because it means lucky, particularly China. We test, sometimes a non-significant result is really good information for us. Is it rational for non-online companies to invest in controlled experiments? They've been doing it for decades, of course. Absolutely, positively. It's easier for online companies to do experiments. It's actually much more expensive and time intensive for non-online companies to run experiments. Is it worth it for a small company to experiment? Yes, it is. Or a waste of time and resources? No, it's not. And I think I've talked through this enough, and I'm probably boring you we're at 54 minutes, and I think you guys are already good. I don't have to go off on a huge tangent here. I hope we got a flavor here now for this co-creation of value stuff. I am a big-time believer, but I'm telling you right now, I'm the minority. I'm feeding you a very, very unique perspective that although the conversation is out there, it's not a widespread conversation, but I firmly believe that this is where we're headed. We are headed in this bottom-up world to a co-created value kind of a world. Good way to wrap that up. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. If anything didn't make sense here, hit me up. Use the force.